A desperate radio operator sits in a dim control tower in Santiago, pounding his fingers against a telegraph key through the heavy static of a violent mountain blizzard. The date is August 2nd, 1947. He receives a frantic, inexplicable Morse code message from a commercial airliner known as the Stardust. The transmission spells out a single bizarre word, STENDEC. The mysterious word repeats 3 times in rapid succession. Then, suffocating silence follows. The plane, along with its 11 passengers and crew members, vanishes into the ether without leaving a single trace behind. For over 50 years, the public believed Flight CS-59 met its end through an explosive device planted by high-profile diplomatic spies on board, or perhaps the aircraft fell victim to paranormal forces. Popular culture embraced these sensationalized theories because search teams never found a single rivet of wreckage along the predicted flight path. The true culprit was far more terrifying than human malice or extraterrestrial intervention. The Earth itself orchestrated an invisible trap, proving that a mountain can swallow a multi-ton aircraft whole and keep it locked in a frozen vault. The frozen time capsule. To understand the magnitude of this disappearance, we must step out of the past and move forward to the year 1998, shattering the established historical timeline from the very start. An expedition of seasoned mountaineers scales the remote, desolate slopes of the Tupungato Glacier high in the Andes Mountains. The air at this altitude is thin enough to starve a human brain of oxygen, and the landscape consists of jagged black rock and ancient blue ice. The climbers navigate treacherous crevasses and blinding snow glare. During their ascent, they stumble upon an object protruding from the solid ice that forces them to halt in their tracks. It is a human arm. The severed limb sticks out from the glacial wall, preserved in pristine condition by the freezing temperatures. The flesh is untouched by decay. The wrist still wears a vintage analog watch, its hands frozen in a bygone era. This gruesome artifact rests miles outside the established 1947 search zone. Beside the arm, the climbers find heavy pieces of twisted metal, a massive Rolls-Royce Merlin aircraft engine, and shredded shreds of period-specific clothing. They have found the Stardust, resting in a place where it has no logical right to be. The discovery of this wreckage blows the official government narratives to pieces and opens a door to a mystery that had tormented families for over half a century. The golden age of flight. To comprehend the doomed journey of the Stardust, we must examine the world of post-war aviation and the ambitious individuals who dared to conquer the skies. In 1947, commercial air travel possessed a distinct aura of danger intertwined with profound glamour. The world was just beginning to heal from the ravages of the Second World War. Aircraft technology had advanced during the conflict, and surplus military bombers found new life as civilian transport planes. The Stardust was an Avro Lancastrian, a machine born from the legendary Lancaster bomber design. Engineers stripped away the bomb bays and gun turrets, replacing them with a slender, unpressurized passenger cabin holding just 13 seats. The aircraft was loud, vibrating with the immense power of its 4-piston engines, and it required passengers to wear oxygen masks when flying over extreme altitudes. The passenger manifest for this fateful flight read like a character list from a classic espionage novel. 11 souls boarded the plane in Buenos Aires, Argentina, destined for Santiago, Chile. Among them sat Paul Simpson, a British King's messenger. Men in his position carried highly classified diplomatic documents across the globe, tethered to their wrists in locked leather pouches. The presence of a King's messenger immediately cast a shadow of international intrigue over the flight. The emerging Cold War meant secret agents and rival governments placed immense value on intercepted communications. Sitting mere rows away was a wealthy Palestinian businessman with a reputation for dealing in smuggled diamonds. Rumors suggested he carried a fortune in uncut gems sewn into the lining of his custom-tailored suit. Other passengers included a Swiss tire executive, a British expatriate returning home, and an older woman journeying to visit her family. They dressed in their finest attire, wearing heavy wool suits and elegant dresses. treating the flight across the Andes as a grand, luxurious event. They entrusted their lives to the machine and to the men tasked with guiding it through the sky. The unforgiving mountains. The route from Buenos Aires to Santiago requires traversing the Andes Mountains, a formidable spine of jagged rock separating Argentina from Chile. Pilots of the era referred to this treacherous crossing as the hump. The Andes stand as one of the most hostile mountain ranges on the planet, featuring peaks that pierce the sky at over 22,000 feet. The weather systems swirling around these summits are legendary for their sudden, violent transformations. Clear blue skies can degrade into opaque whiteout blizzards in a matter of minutes. In 1947, pilots lacked the luxury of modern technology. There were no GPS satellites orbiting the Earth to pinpoint their exact coordinates. Air traffic control radar was virtually non-existent in the remote stretches of South America. Commercial pilots navigated through a perilous method known as dead reckoning. This required absolute reliance on rudimentary cockpit instruments, a magnetic compass to determine direction, an airspeed indicator to measure how fast the plane moved through the air, and a reliable stopwatch. By knowing their speed and tracking their time, a navigator could calculate the distance traveled. This mathematical equation worked flawlessly on paper. In the physical world, it required the pilot to make visual contact with the ground to confirm their position. When the clouds rolled in and obscured the Earth, the pilot became a blind man feeling his way through a maze of stone. The hunt for the stardust. When the Santiago control tower lost contact with the stardust, authorities did not immediately assume the worst. Radios of that era frequently failed, and mountain static often blocked transmissions. However, as the hours ticked by and the fuel reserves of the Avro Lancastrian dwindled to nothing, a chilling reality set in. The plane was down. The governments of Chile and Argentina launched one of the most extensive and desperate search operations in the history of South American aviation. Fleets of military aircraft took to the skies, tracing the predicted flight path over the Andes. Ground troops, experienced mountaineers, and local guides trekked into the high-altitude passes, enduring freezing temperatures and blinding snow squalls. They scoured deep valleys, scaled sheer cliff faces, and inspected every shadowed crevasse they could reach. The searchers sought any sign of disaster. They looked for the black smudge of an impact crater on the white snow. They hunted for the glint of shattered aluminum in the sunlight. They hoped to spot a plume of dark smoke rising from an engine fire. They found nothing. The absolute lack of physical evidence baffled the military commanders. A machine weighing tens of thousands of pounds, loaded with fuel, metal, and human beings, cannot vanish without leaving a scar on the landscape. Yet the Andes offered only a pristine, unbroken blanket of white snow. The sheer scale of the mountain range dwarfed the rescue efforts. Searching the Andes for a single airplane is akin to searching an entire ocean for a single lost rowboat. As the weeks turned into months, the harsh southern winter set in, bringing relentless snowfall that forced the military to abandon the hunt. The mountains had claimed the stardust, and they refused to surrender a single clue. Whispers in the dark. The void of factual evidence birthed a monstrous wave of speculation. The human mind abhors an unsolved puzzle, and when official investigations fail to provide answers, imagination fills the empty spaces. The press seized upon the passenger manifest, turning the disappearance into a blockbuster narrative of sabotage and murder. Newspaper headlines focused heavily on Paul Simpson, the King's Messenger. Theorists proposed that rival espionage networks planted a timed explosive device in the cargo hold to destroy the classified documents he carried. The theory suggested the plane detonated mid-air, scattering its fragments over such a vast area that searchers could never piece the debris field together. Other writers pointed their fingers at the wealthy diamond smuggler, suggesting a violent hijacking gone wrong. They crafted tales of the crew being forced at gunpoint to divert the plane to a hidden airstrip, where the passengers were executed and the gems stolen. As the years progressed into the 1950s, the emergence of UFO culture added a supernatural layer to the tragedy. Fringe investigators highlighted the bizarre, repeating final message: STENDEC. Analysts spent decades trying to decipher this cryptic Morse code. Some claimed it was an anagram for dissent. Others believed it was an acronym for a secret military protocol. The most extreme theories suggested it was not a human message at all, but an alien transmission intercepted by the radio operator right as a flying saucer abducted the aircraft. While the public consumed these thrilling conspiracies, the families of the missing passengers endured a specific, agonizing form of psychological torture known as ambiguous loss. Without a body to bury or a crash site to mourn, the grieving process froze. Wives left porch lights burning for husbands who would never walk through the door. Children grew into adults while harboring a faint, irrational hope that their fathers were surviving in some remote mountain village, suffering from amnesia. The lack of closure rotted away their peace of mind. The loved ones of the Stardust victims were trapped in an eternal purgatory of ambiguity, waiting for a resolution that seemed destined never to arrive: the invisible river. To unravel the true nature of the disaster, we must abandon the theories of spies, bombs, and alien abductions. We must look to the sky itself and to an invisible force of nature that remained completely undocumented by commercial aviation authorities in 1947. This brings us to the core of the mystery, revealing a profound information gap between what we know today and what the crew knew then. High above the Earth, in the upper layers of the troposphere, massive rivers of air snake their way across the globe. We call these invisible currents jet streams. These fierce winds can reach speeds exceeding 200 miles per hour, flowing from west to east. Today, meteorologists track these currents with precise satellite arrays, and commercial jetliners use them to their advantage, riding the winds to save fuel and increase speed. During the Second World War, American bomber pilots flying high-altitude missions over Japan first encountered this terrifying atmospheric anomaly. They reported flying their aircraft at maximum engine power, yet making zero forward progress over the ground, as if suspended in a massive invisible web. While military scientists began studying this phenomenon in the Northern Hemisphere, the existence and behavior of jet streams over the South American Andes remained a complete blank spot on the map. Captain Reginald Cook, the seasoned pilot of the Stardust, was an elite Royal Air Force veteran. He possessed exceptional skill, steady nerves, and a deep understanding of his machine. He had flown numerous combat missions and survived the deadliest skies in human history. Yet, as he guided his passenger plane up to 24,000 feet to clear the towering Andean peaks, he unwittingly flew his aircraft directly into the teeth of a massive roaring jet stream. We now hold the terrifying upper hand in knowledge. We can observe the tragedy unfolding from above, seeing the lethal trap the environment has set. The Stardust pushes forward into an invisible 100-mile-per-hour headwind. The massive force of the rushing air pushes against the nose of the plane, acting like an invisible hand holding a toy model in place. The fatal illusion. Inside the freezing, vibrating cockpit, Captain Cook is completely stripped of all agency. He relies purely on his rudimentary instruments and his elite training. He checks his airspeed indicator. The pitot tubes on the wings measure the speed of the air rushing past the metal hull. Because the plane is flying into a massive headwind, the airspeed indicator registers a healthy, fast cruising speed. Captain Cook believes he is cutting through the sky at over 200 miles per hour. He checks his stopwatch. He knows the distance from Buenos Aires to Santiago. He does the mathematical calculations in his head. Speed multiplied by time equals distance traveled. Based on the numbers displayed on his glowing analog dials, the Stardust has successfully crossed the perilous spine of the Andes Mountains. The math guarantees that the jagged peaks of rock and ice are safely behind them. Captain Cook cannot see the mountains. A dense, swirling storm system has engulfed the aircraft, wrapping the windows in a blinding sheet of grey clouds and white snow. He cannot feel the invisible wind holding him back. He is suffering from a fatal illusion of progress. In reality, the jet stream is secretly halving their actual ground speed. While the plane moves fast through the air, It moves agonizingly slow over the Earth. The stardust is not past the mountains. It is hovering directly over the most dangerous peaks in the entire range. The radio operator in the cockpit taps out the final, fateful message to Santiago: STENDEC. While debate over the word's meaning will rage for decades, the most logical explanation is a simple Morse code transcription error caused by severe static, likely meant to signal their estimated time of arrival. The crew feels a sense of relief. The hardest part of the journey is over. Trusting his instruments and his impeccable mathematics, Captain Cook reaches for the heavy metal throttle levers. He pulls them back, reducing the roaring power of the 4 Merlin engines. He adjusts the control yoke, dipping the nose of the Avro-Lancastrian downward. He initiates a calculated, steady descent into the thick, blinding storm clouds to make his final approach toward the Santiago runway. He is an unwitting hostage to unknown physics. Every action he takes is correct according to his training, yet every action seals his doom. He is actively flying his multi-ton aircraft, loaded with 11 living, breathing human beings, directly into a colossal wall of solid stone and ancient ice. The final descent. Inside the vibrating metal shell of the Avro-Lancastrian, the atmosphere remains calm and routine. The unpressurized passenger cabin offers a Spartan environment, far removed from the luxurious interiors of modern commercial aviation. The wealthy diamond merchant, the king's messenger, and the other 9 occupants sit wrapped in heavy wool blankets to ward off the biting cold of the high-altitude air. They breathe through rubber oxygen masks, listening to the relentless, deafening drone of the 4 massive Rolls-Royce Merlin piston engines mounted on the wings outside. The passengers trust the machine, and they place their complete faith in the men commanding it from the front. They believe the grueling journey over the treacherous peaks of the Andes mountain range has reached its conclusion. They anticipate a warm welcome on the paved runways of Santiago, expecting to unbuckle their restraints and step out into the crisp evening air of a new city in a matter of minutes. Up in the cockpit, Captain Reginald Cook grips the dual control yoke with steady, confident hands. He relies on his extensive Royal Air Force training and his rudimentary array of analog instruments to navigate the blinding white void of the storm outside his windows. The dense cloud cover obscures all visual reference points, turning the world beyond the glass into an opaque sea of swirling grey mist and freezing moisture. Captain Cook initiates a deliberate maneuver to bring the aircraft down from its cruising altitude of 24,000 feet. He reaches for the heavy throttle quadrant, wrapping his fingers around the metal levers that dictate the power output of the engines. He pulls the levers back, reducing the roaring mechanical fury of the motors to a steady, lower-pitched hum. He pushes the control yoke forward, angling the nose of the plane toward the Earth to begin a calculated descent through the impenetrable weather system. The illusion of progress. The invisible weather phenomenon known as a jet stream continues to hold the aircraft hostage. The hurricane-force winds blast against the nose of the machine, fighting every inch of forward momentum. The instruments inside the cockpit lie to the crew with mathematical precision. The airspeed indicator registers a robust cruising speed because the air rushing past the external sensors moves with intense velocity. Captain Cook watches the sweeping hand of his stopwatch, calculating the distance traveled based on the numbers displayed on his glowing dials. The math insists the aircraft has cleared the lethal spine of the mountain range. The math insists the jagged peaks of black rock and ancient ice lie miles behind the tail section. The tragic reality remains hidden from the crew. The invisible headwind has cut their actual ground speed in half, holding the aircraft in a suspended state of slow motion over the most dangerous terrain in the entire continent. The descent maneuver, designed to bring them down safely toward the airport, instead acts as a fatal plunge directly into the heart of the towering Tupungato mountain. The microscopic seconds. The mechanics of the final moments unfold with agonizing slowness inside the freezing cockpit. The sweeping second hand of the analog clock ticks forward across the black dial. Small drops of condensation form on the glass face of the altimeter, tracing crooked paths downward as the needle rotates to indicate the loss of altitude. The metal control levers vibrate beneath the relaxed grip of the pilot. The crew looks forward, attempting to pierce the gloom of the blizzard with their eyes. For a fraction of a second, the swirling grey mist of the storm clouds parts. The weather system tears open to reveal a localized pocket of clear air. Through this fleeting window, an impossible image materializes mere inches beyond the spinning propeller blades. A blinding, impenetrable wall of vertical blue ice fills the entire field of vision. The sheer face of the Tupungato Glacier stands before them, rising like a frozen monolith into the clouds above. The human brain requires a specific amount of time to process visual information, recognize a threat, and send motor commands to the muscles. Captain Cook registers the colossal wall of solid stone and ancient ice, but the laws of physics dictate the outcome before his hands can react. The realization of impending doom arrives before the sound of the impact can even reach the ears of the crew. The silent avalanche. The Avro-Lancastrian collides with the vertical glacier face in a catastrophic transfer of kinetic energy. The massive metal propellers, forged from solid steel, strike the dense blue ice first. The blades shatter upon impact, ripping the roaring engines from their mounts on the wings. The aluminum fuselage of the aircraft crumples inward, like fragile paper, absorbing the tremendous force of a machine weighing tens of thousands of pounds, striking an immovable object at cruising speed. The impact offers zero chance of survival for the souls on board, bringing their journey to an instantaneous and violent end. The environment responds to the intrusion with overwhelming force. The colossal noise of the crash, the screeching of tearing metal, and the explosive rupture of aviation fuel tanks send a massive acoustic shockwave rippling up the sheer slopes of the mountain. Thousands of feet above the impact zone, vast cornices of unstable snow cling precariously to the rocky ridges. The acoustic wave from the crash shatters the fragile bonds holding the snowpack together. The mountain unleashes a tremendous avalanche of white powder and heavy ice chunks. The avalanche gathers momentum as it plummets down the near-vertical face of the Tupungato Peak. It forms a fluid wave of destruction, roaring down the slopes with the power of a freight train. Within exactly 3 minutes of the initial aircraft impact, millions of tons of snow and ice cascade over the wreckage. The sheer volume of falling snow extinguishes any fires ignited by the ruptured fuel lines. The avalanche pours into every torn crevice of the shattered fuselage, filling the cabin with freezing white powder. The rushing tide of snow covers the twisted metal wings, burying the broken engines deep beneath the surface. When the final clouds of snow dust settle in the freezing air, the mountain reclaims its profound, eerie silence. The Earth operates with ruthless efficiency, erasing every single trace of the disaster from the surface of the planet before the very first rescue plane ever manages to take off from a runway. The flawed rescue. When the military search and rescue fleets mobilize the following morning, they take to the skies with a fundamental misunderstanding of the landscape below them. The rescue pilots navigate the same treacherous mountain passes, fighting the turbulent winds and searching the jagged valleys for any sign of a disaster. The men peering out of the search plane windows look for specific visual cues. They hunt for the dark, ugly smudge of an impact crater carved into the white snowpack. They search for the glint of sunlight reflecting off scattered sheets of polished aluminum. They strain their eyes, hoping to spot a lingering plume of dark smoke rising from a smoldering engine fire. The mountain presents them with an unbroken, pristine blanket of white snow stretching across the entire range. The searchers fly directly over the precise coordinates of the crash site numerous times. They look down at the exact location where the stardust rests, but they see nothing beyond undisturbed nature. The catastrophic avalanche served as a perfect eraser, concealing the tragedy under millions of tons of fresh snow. The investigators assume an aircraft cannot vanish without leaving a visible scar on the Earth, leading them to draft complex theories of espionage, high-altitude mid-air explosions, and alien abductions to explain the total lack of physical evidence. They look for the airplane on top of the mountain, completely unaware that the dead passengers are secretly flowing inside of it, the river of ice. To comprehend the ultimate fate of the missing aircraft, we must understand the terrifying mechanics of the Tupungato Glacier. A glacier is not a static, frozen tomb. It does not act like a block of ice sitting motionless in a freezer. A glacier is a massive, living, breathing entity, composed of frozen water, driven by the relentless pull of gravity. It functions as a slow-moving river of destruction, carving its way through solid rock over centuries. At the high altitudes of the Andes, fresh snow falls continuously throughout the harsh winters. This fresh snow accumulates in deep layers near the summit, resting in a massive bowl known as the accumulation zone. As the layers pile up year after year, the immense weight of the fresh snow presses down on the older layers beneath it. This crushing pressure squeezes the trapped air out of the snow, transforming the fluffy white flakes into a dense, granular substance called firn. As more weight presses down from above, the firn undergoes further compression, eventually transforming into solid, heavy, blue glacial ice. The sheer mass of this accumulated ice becomes too heavy to remain stationary on the steep slopes of the mountain. Gravity seizes control of the immense frozen structure, pulling the entire mass downward. The immense pressure at the bottom of the glacier causes a thin layer of ice to melt, creating a lubricated surface of water against the bedrock. The glacier begins to slide over the rock face, while the internal layers of ice deform and flow like thick, cold plastic. This movement transforms the glacier into a relentless conveyor belt of ice, grinding its way down the mountain valley at a pace of a few feet every year. The mechanical meat grinder. The stardust did not crash and sit idle upon a mountaintop. The catastrophic avalanche pushed the burning wreckage directly into the active accumulation zone of the Tupungato Glacier. The aircraft became an unwitting passenger on a 50-year journey through a subterranean frozen hell. As the years passed, new blizzards deposited massive layers of fresh snow over the crash site. The airplane sank deeper and deeper into the dark, silent core of the glacier. The environment subjected the frail aluminum structure of the passenger plane to incomprehensible crushing forces. The weight of millions of tons of solid blue ice pressed against the metal from every conceivable angle. The fuselage, designed to withstand the thin air of high altitudes, offered no resistance to the crushing embrace of the glacier. The ice flattened the passenger cabin, folding the heavy metal wings as if they were made of cheap tin. As gravity pulled the glacier down the mountain, the frozen river flowed over jagged ridges of solid granite bedrock. The immense internal pressure forced the ice to navigate these underground obstacles, tearing the entombed aircraft to pieces in the process. The glacier acted as a colossal mechanical meat grinder, churning the wreckage within its dark core. The movement ripped the massive Rolls-Royce engines away from the shattered wings. It shredded the rubber tires of the landing gear. It tore the unyielding steel cables of the flight controls into twisted knots. The fragmented remains of the 11 human passengers, frozen solid in a state of perfect preservation, traveled along with the torn metal, migrating miles down the mountain in absolute darkness. The decades pass. While the glacier digested the aircraft in its freezing depths, the world above the ice changed at a rapid pace. Decades rolled by, bringing profound shifts to human civilization. The propeller planes of the 1940s gave way to massive commercial jetliners, capable of crossing oceans in hours. Satellite technology launched into orbit, providing instant communication and precise global positioning systems. The geopolitical tensions of the Cold War rose and fell. The families of the missing passengers aged, enduring a unique and agonizing form of psychological torture. The loved ones left behind suffered from the crushing burden of ambiguous loss. Without a crash site to investigate, without physical evidence to examine, and without remains to bury, the natural grieving process stalled. Spouses lived their entire lives harboring faint, irrational hopes that their partners survived the ordeal. Children grew into elderly adults, forever haunted by the unsolved mystery of their parents vanishing into thin air. The mountain kept its grim secret locked away in its frozen vault for half a century, denying the families any sense of peace or closure. The warming earth. The earth eventually forces all secrets to the surface. As the 20th century drew to a close, a global shift in climate patterns began to alter the landscape of the Andes Mountains. Rising global temperatures initiated a slow, steady retreat of the ancient glaciers. The terminus of the Tupungato Glacier, located at the bottom of the mountain valley, began to melt at a faster rate than the fresh snow could replenish at the summit. The frozen river started to shrink, retreating back up the rocky slopes and leaving behind vast fields of ground rock and debris known as moraines. In January of 1998, an expedition of experienced civilian mountaineers set out to conquer the remote peak of Tupungato. They navigated the treacherous terrain of the ablation zone, the lower section of the glacier where the melting ice reveals the hidden contents of the frozen river. As they picked their way across the jagged rocks and the slick, melting blue ice, they stumbled upon an anomaly that shattered the silence of the desolate landscape. The climbers found heavy pieces of twisted metal protruding from the melting ice walls. They found heavy mechanical components that defied the natural environment. They discovered a massive, rusted Rolls-Royce Merlin aircraft engine resting upon the glacial moraine. They found heavy rubber landing gear tires, their tread patterns remarkably intact despite decades of crushing pressure. Then, they made the discovery that brought the 50-year mystery to a chilling halt. They found the perfectly preserved human arm jutting from the solid ice face. The freezing environment halted all biological decay, preserving the flesh in perfect condition. The vintage analog wristwatch remained strapped to the wrist, its mechanical hands frozen in the exact moments following the disaster. The climbers found shredded pieces of period-specific clothing, leather shoes, and shattered pieces of clear plexiglass from airplane windows. The glacier had finished its 50-year digestion process, finally spitting the crushed, mangled remains of the stardust out at its base. The forensic extraction. The discovery of the wreckage sparked a massive coordinated response from the Argentine military. An expedition named Operation Esperanza launched into the high Andes to reclaim the lost passengers and investigate the debris field. The military personnel faced extreme challenges operating at such high altitudes, where the thin air made helicopter flights incredibly dangerous and ground movement exhausting. The soldiers established base camps on the unforgiving ice, battling severe cold and sudden mountain squalls to excavate the site. The forensic investigators approached the scattered debris field not as a simple crash site, but as a complex geological puzzle. Glaciologists mapped the precise location of every piece of twisted metal and every frozen human remain emerging from the ice. By measuring the exact speed at which the Tupungato Glacier moved over the past 50 years, the scientists performed complex reverse calculations. They traced the path of the debris field backward, up the steep slopes of the mountain, pointing their mathematics directly at an invisible spot near the towering summit. The calculations confirmed the exact location of the original impact, proving beyond a shadow of a doubt that the airplane struck the vertical face of the mountain and triggered the massive avalanche that buried it. The physical evidence gathered from the melting ice demolished every conspiracy theory built over the previous half-century. Investigators examined the shattered propeller blades recovered from the moraine. They noted the extreme backward bending of the solid metal blades, a forensic detail proving the powerful engines were running at high capacity at the exact moment of impact. This evidence completely ruled out the theory of a mid-air explosion or a mechanical failure. The investigators found no traces of explosive residue on the torn aluminum panels, silencing the rumors of espionage and sabotage targeting the King's messenger. The position of the recovered throttle levers confirmed Captain Cook initiated a deliberate descent maneuver, believing he was safely past the mountain range. The evidence proved the disaster was a tragic combination of unknown atmospheric weather forces and severe navigational illusions, completely devoid of human malice or extraterrestrial interference. The final rest. The recovery operation brought an end to the agonizing purgatory endured by the families of the victims. The military carefully extracted the mummified remains from the melting ice, treating the long-lost passengers with profound dignity and respect. Modern forensic science, utilizing advanced DNA testing protocols, successfully identified the individuals listed on the original passenger manifest. The authorities identified the British King's messenger the Palestinian diamond merchant, the Swiss tire executive, and the dedicated flight crew. The remains returned to the civilized world, allowing families to hold proper funeral services half a century after the disaster occurred. The frozen time capsule of the Andes mountain range surrendered its captives to a world that had moved on without them. The torturous ambiguity dissolved, replaced by the grim but necessary reality of closure. The mountain preserved the tragedy in pristine condition, offering a chilling testament to the overwhelming power of the natural environment and the extreme vulnerability of human ambition. Glaciers are not static tombs. They are moving, breathing entities that will inevitably surrender their darkest secrets, proving that the Earth never allows anything to stay buried forever. But if you think the crushing ice is the only environment capable of swallowing a person without leaving a single trace behind, you need to see what happens when the wilderness plays an entirely different psychological trick on the human mind. Click the video on your screen right now titled, "Everyone is saying the same thing about this disappearance," to uncover a case where the surviving evidence defies all known logic.